في أكبر الكتب.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're unpacking a story that, well, it feels like it was ripped straight from a satirist's notebook, but it's very real. We are talking about the United States in 2026, making a formal, pretty aggressive push to buy Greenland.
It sounds like a joke, doesn't it? Like a game of Monopoly where someone just slams a pile of cash on the board and says, I'll take it. But when you dig into the documents we're looking at today, specifically this transcript between geopolitical observers Enamul, Haque, and Philip Shaw, you realize this is no joke at all. It's a signal that the world order is, well, breaking.
And that's really the mission for this deep dive, isn't it? We aren't just talking about a real estate reel. We're talking about what these sources call a rupture. We're looking at why this frozen island with a population of a small college town is suddenly the center of gravity for the world's superpowers.
And just to set the stage, the sources here are really interesting. You've got Haque, who's giving a perspective from the global south, from Bangladesh, and then you have Shaw providing the Canadian viewpoint.
Yeah. And that Canadian angle, it turns out to be the key to the whole thing. It explains why everyone is so nervous.
Exactly.
So let's jump into the headline event. It's 2026. The U.S. administration has moved beyond just, hinting at this or actively pursuing it. And the reaction described in the source material is loud.
Loud is putting it mildly. I mean, you have protests in Copenhagen, you have the Greenlandic government issuing these hard refusals.
Yeah.
And the rest of Europe is just kind of staring in disbelief.
Yeah.
But here's the nuance that Huck and Shaw bring up right away. This isn't actually a new idea. It feels sudden to us. But the U.S. has been eyeing Greenland for a very, very long time.
Right. The sources get into World War II. I think most people know there's a U.S. military base there, but I really didn't realize how deep those roots went.
Oh, they go way back.
Yeah.
All the way to 1941. When Denmark was overrun by Nazi Germany, the U.S. basically stepped in. They occupied Greenland to, keep it safe. They built bases, established a presence. So for the last 85 years, the U.S. has been a tenant on the island.
A tenant.
The only thing changing in 2026 is that the tenant wants to become the landlord.
And when you look at the stats of the place, it just seems like a terrible investment, at least on paper. I mean, I looked up the numbers from the source material. Greenland is massive geographically, but the population is just 57,000 people.
It's tiny.
Yeah.
You could fit the entire population of Greenland into a football stadium and still have empty seats.
Wow.
And economically, it is completely dependent on Denmark. The Danish government sends huge subsidies every single year just to keep the lights on.
So if you're a business-minded president, you're looking at this and thinking, why am I buying a money pit? Unless the value has nothing to do with the people or the economy.
Exactly. You don't buy Greenland for the tax revenue. You buy it for the map.
Yeah.
And this is where Philip Shaw, the Canadian observer, really changes the whole conversation. He keeps pointing out the invisible neighbor.
Canada.
Yes, and all the media frenzy about the U.S. and Denmark, everyone forgets that Canada is literally right there.
I have to admit, until I saw the map included in the notes, I didn't realize just how right there it is.
It's shocking, isn't it?
Yeah.
We tend to think of the Atlantic as this massive barrier. But up north, between Canada's Ellesmere Island and the coast of Greenland, the gap is minuscule.
The source said, what, 27 kilometers?
27.
That's nothing.
It's nothing. It's a morning commute. You could see across it on a clear day. So from Canada's perspective, this isn't the U.S. buying some island over there.
Yeah.
This is the U.S. aggressively moving to take control of territory that is effectively on the Canadian border.
And the source describes this real anxiety in Ottawa because Canada has always claimed to be the king of the North, right? I mean, it's in their anthem, the true North, strong and free.
It is absolutely central to the Canadian identity.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between identity and reality. The reality is that the Canadian high Arctic is empty. It's vast, it's brutal, and it's largely unpatrolled. So Canada feels squeezed. They're the meat in the sandwich between Alaska, which is American, and Greenland, which the U.S. is trying to buy.
The sources mention these sovereignty signals that Canada sends up. I found this part fascinating because it sounds so, performative.
It is performative. That's exactly what it is. The source describes these government flights that go up to the 80th parallel. They paint the planes with specific polar bear emblems and fly them into tiny outposts like Grace Fjord and Iqaluit.
Just to say, we were here.
Precisely. They're spending millions of dollars flying these planes into frozen hamlets just to plant the flag. Just to remind the world that, Canada actually exists up there. Because the fear, and Shaw is very explicit about this, is that if you aren't present, you lose it.
Right.
Sovereignty isn't just a line on a map. It's about who shows up.
And showing up is not easy. We need to pause and just talk about what showing up actually means up there. The source material paints a pretty bleak picture.
It is hostile. I mean, we are talking about temperatures that routinely hit minus 50 degrees Celsius.
Minus 50.
And in the winter, you have 24 hours of darkness. This is not land you can just settle easily.
Which makes the indigenous connection that the notes mention so important. The people who do live there, the Inuit, they don't see these borders the way politicians do.
No, and that's the human tragedy underneath all the geopolitics. The indigenous people of the Canadian Arctic and the indigenous people of Greenland are related. They share a culture, a language group, a history. They are one people. But because of decisions made in European and American capitals centuries ago, they're divided by a border. And now, that border is becoming a flashpoint.
But, and here's the twist, the reason that Flashpoint is getting hotter is because the physical environment is getting warmer. We can't talk about the Greenland purchase without talking about climate change.
This is the why. This is the whole ballgame. If the ice stays frozen forever, Greenland is just a strategic location for a radar base. But the ice isn't staying frozen. The source material drops a statistic that just stops you in your tracks. The Russian Arctic is now open for navigation 4 months a year.
4 months. That used to be 0, right? It was impassable.
Essentially, yes, you needed heavy icebreakers, and even then it was slow and incredibly dangerous. Now, for a third of the year, it's open water, and that changes the physics of the global economy.
Because ships can go over the top.
They can go over the top. The source mentions a test ship that went from Shanghai to Germany, right over the Arctic. And this is where we have to talk about choke points. This is the concept that really explains the American panic.
Okay, let's unpack choke points, because usually when we talk about trade, we talk about free flow, but you're saying trade is actually about bottlenecks.
Exactly. For the last 100 years, if you wanted to ship something from, say, China to London or from Tokyo to New York, you had to pass through very specific gates. The Suez Canal, the Strait of Malacca near Singapore, the Panama Canal, Gibraltar.
And those gates are narrow. You can block them.
You can block them, you can tax them, or you can control them militarily.
Right.
And historically, who has guaranteed the security of those gates?
The U.S. Navy.
The U.S. Navy and its allies. That control gave the West immense leverage over the global economy. But if the Arctic opens up,
And those gates they don't matter anymore.
they become almost irrelevant.
Yeah.
Yeah. If a Chinese ship can sail north, bypass Singapore, bypass Suez, and go straight to Europe, then the traditional toll booths of the world lose their power.
So the U.S. isn't just buying land. They are trying to buy the new toll booth.
They are trying to secure the new route. If the trade moves north, the U.S. needs to control the north. Otherwise, they're just watching the traffic go by from the sidelines.
And Canada's trying to get in on this too. There was a mention of a Port Churchill, which I think most people know as the polar bear capital of the world, not a major shipping hub.
Right. But look at the map again. Hudson's Bay cuts right into the middle of the North American continent. It's saltwater. And Churchill is a port on that bay.
And it's connected by rail.
It is. So the Canadian plan, or, the dream, really, is to upgrade that port. Instead of shipping wheat or potash all the way east to Montreal or west to Vancouver, you put it on a train to Churchill, put it on a ship, and send it straight over the Arctic to Europe or Russia.
It's a massive shortcut.
It's a huge shortcut. It reorients the entire logistical flow of the continent. Instead of everything moving east-west, things start moving north.
It really feels like we're watching a board game where the rules just change in the middle of a turn.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the rupture.
Yes. The Davos speech. The Canadian Prime Minister didn't mince words in the transcript.
No. He corrected the interviewer. The interviewer called this era a transition.
Sure.
And the Prime Minister said, no, this is a rupture.
What's the difference to you?
The transition is a gradient. It's smooth. We used to use horses, now we use cars. A rupture is a break. It's an earthquake. It implies violence and sudden irreversible change.
And the source material connects this rupture to resources. We aren't just talking about shipping containers. We're talking about what powers the ships.
The resource wars. This is the other side of the coin. We are used to a world where oil comes from the Middle East, or Venezuela, or Mexico. But the source points out that those places are volatile.
They mention instability in Iran and Venezuela specifically as drivers for this shift.
Right. If you were a superpower and you see the Middle East getting more and more unstable, you start looking for a backup battery. And the Arctic Greenland specifically is that backup.
But isn't it still incredibly hard to drill there? I mean, we just talked about minus 50 degrees.
It is hard. The experts in the transcript estimate it's probably 20 years away from being commercially viable on a large scale. But nations operate on 50-year horizons. They aren't planning for next quarter, they're planning for the next generation. They know the easy oil is gone, the future is under the ice.
So you have the U.S. making a grab for land. You have Canada nervously flying flags. The ice is melting. And you have this scramble for resources. It sounds like a recipe for conflict. And usually when we have conflict, we have a referee. We have the United Nations.
And this is the most chilling part of the source material for me. This is the detail that keeps me up at night.
The funding crisis.
The funding crisis. Enamul Haque points this out explicitly. The UN is facing a catastrophic shortfall. The source predicts that by July 2026, right in the middle of this Greenland crisis, the UN could essentially be out of money.
Wait, that seems impossible. The UN broke.
It reflects this huge loss of trust. The board of peace that the U.S. built after World War II is fracturing. Countries aren't paying their dues because they don't believe in the institution anymore.
So at the exact moment the world is rupturing, when borders are being challenged and treaties are being ignored, the one organization designed to stop World War III is turning out its pockets.
It creates a vacuum, a lawless zone. If there's no referee, then the player with the biggest stick wins. And that brings us right back to why the U.S. is being so aggressive.
Right, the rationale for it.
It's very clear. The claim is that they need Greenland to defend against China and Russia. It's a preemptive move. The source notes that Greenlanders haven't actually seen Chinese warships in their harbors yet. But the fear of them is enough to drive policy.
It's containment. It's the Cold War all over again, but the geography has shifted north.
And the stakes are higher because the environment itself is unstable. In the Cold War, the ground wasn't literally melting beneath the tanks.
So let's try to synthesize this for the listener. We started this deep dive with a headline that sounded like a tabloid rumor. President tries to buy Greenland. It's funny. It's weird. But what we found is that it's actually the loose thread that unravels everything.
It pulls on the climate thread. It pulls on the global trade thread. It pulls on the collapse of international institutions.
Yeah.
You pull on Greenland, and the whole 20th century world order falls down.
And the countries caught in the middle, Canada, Denmark, are realizing that their old strategies just don't work anymore.
Canada's the prime example.
Yeah.
They spent a century relying on the fact that the Arctic was frozen and impassable. It was a natural wall. Now the wall is coming down, and they're realizing they have a 27-kilometer gap in their armor, and their biggest ally is trying to occupy the land on the other side of it.
It just changes how you look at a map. We think of borders as ink on paper, permanent. But this deep dive suggests that a few degrees of temperature change can erase those lines faster than any army.
The map is not the territory. When the territory changes state from solid to liquid, the map becomes fiction.
And we can't forget the people. The 57,000 Greenlanders. The Inuit in Canada.
They're the ones I keep thinking about. In all these high-level strategy sessions in Washington or Davos where they talk about shipping lanes and oil barrels, the people living there are just obstacles or leverage. They are trying to maintain a culture in a place that the rest of the world has decided is the next battlefield.
So, as we wrap up, we usually like to leave the listener with something to chew on, a forward-looking question.
I think the big question here is about control.
Go on.
We spent the last century asking, who owns the land? Wars were fought over borders. But as the Arctic opens, the question changes. The land is almost secondary. The question is, who controls the shortcut?
The water.
The water. Because whoever controls the shortcut, whoever dictates who can sail through the Arctic and who can't, controls the flow of the world's wealth. They control the cost of your electronics, the availability of your energy, the speed of your Amazon delivery.
And right now, the U.S., Russia, and China are all racing for the top of the world to grab the keys to that shortcut.
And the scary part is, there is no referee on the field to blow the whistle.
On that note, which is both fascinating and a little terrifying, we are going to wrap up this deep dive into the Greenland puzzle. It's a story we are going to have to watch closely because unlike the ice, it's not disappearing anytime soon. Thanks for listening.
Securus.